Hello, welcome to another insightful session on Storage Guru. I am Smita and alongside Peter Tannenhaus, we are happy to announce the support for Snapdiff version 3 API with SP-client version 8.123. I will request Pete to take it hereafter.
My name is Pete Tannenhaus and I'm going to be presenting the Snapdiff ONTAP version 3 API enablement that's being announced in the 8.123 client. And I'm going to give a brief overview and history of Snapdiff, brief descriptions of both APIs, what is being announced in 8.123, and new certificate options that are used by the version 3 APIs. Brief overview of Snapdiff. It's supported on Windows and Linux, x64 Windows and x86 Linux, and it's an alternate file level backup method for remote Netapp volumes accessed through file sharing, which would be sieves for Windows and NFS for Linux. And it's based on a Netapp differencing engine that's available to select partners such as IBM. And the term Snapdiff refers to the Netapp differencing engine that runs on the filer, and it derives differences from two provided snapshots very quickly and provides them over file sharing to the client. And the client loads these changes into a persistent changelog database, and that's what the differential backup process, the differential backup processes. And the benefit over a full progressive incremental is that the entire file system doesn't have to be scanned, which can be particularly painful since these volumes are remote and it's going over file sharing. And it works best on file systems or volumes where a small percentage of the files change during the backup window. Just a brief history. Snapdiff has been around for about 15 years, and this is the chronology of everything that's gone in. And the latest changes that I'm speaking about today, they were actually implemented last year in 8.120 in the third quarter of 2023. But due to a lack of a license agreement with Netapp, we're not able to release it until now. A brief overview of the version 1 API. This is what's used by this says 8.120. It's actually 8.123, and I'll speak to that in a minute. And this is commonly referred to as the ZAPI, and this communicates to the filer either through HTTP or HTTPS. And it's basically a thin pass-through layer for issuing commands to the filer in XML, and that includes doing snapshot management, the differencing API itself, and it employs static libraries from the Netapp management SDK. And it's currently deprecated, and Netapp has indicated that at some point it will be removed entirely in a future version of ONTAP, but as of yet, they haven't committed to doing that or said when it's going to be done. And for a very brief period of time in ONTAP 9.8, the first couple level or two, they actually disabled the ZAPI, and they required using a diagnostic command to re-enable it. But at some point, they changed their position on it and they re-enabled it. So later versions of 9.8 will support the version 1 API without having to issue any diagnostic commands. And the key thing about the version API thing that's probably the most interesting is that it does not support flex group volumes. And flex group volumes, they basically they replace what used to be called infinite volumes. Anyhow, the version 3 API, it's a complete replacement of the ZAPI, and it's mostly REST API based. There is a portion of it that uses RPC, and the RPC portion of it is used. There's a REST API that's issued that generates an access token, and that is supplied with a Netapp provided license. And the Snapdiff session on the filer is started with the access token, and that's what uses like RPC to actually use the differencing engine to get the changes from the filer. And the version 3 API, it requires 9.8 or above. And unlike the version 1 API, it does support flex group volumes. Overview of what is being announced in this release, and I say announced because this support was actually in 8.1.20. It just wasn't announced or enabled due to like the licensing issues with Netapp. So it is a complete rewrite of all the ONTAP API code that's in the client hardware plugin, and it continues to support. We continue to support all versions of ONTAP that we supported before version 3 API, and by default with ONTAP 9.8 and above, version 3 will be used when it's enabled with the license, and there is a test flag to force it back to using version 1 that's provided pretty much as a diagnostic tool. And again, older pre 9.8 versions of ONTAP will continue to use the version 1 ZAPI. So it's mostly transparent to the end user. The backups look almost exactly the same. The two biggest difference from an end user perspective are the new SSL certificate options for the REST APIs, and some cosmetic change to display the API version and a few other things, which you'll see when I show the demo. And existing volumes that have been backed up by older clients with the version 1 API will work seamlessly with the version 3 API. That means if a volume was backed up with version 1 and the snapshot is stored on the server, then the next backup with version 3 should pick up right where it left off with no interruption. And as I said, a license file is required in order to enable the version 3 support, and if the license file doesn't exist, it automatically reverts to the version 1 ZAPI, and that's basically how 8.1.20 shipped. It shipped without a license, so since there's no license, 8.1.20 will fall back to use the version 1 API, and as I said, the license was added to the 8.1.23 package to enable it. And really, it's possible to add the license to 8.1.20 and above to enable it, but it's not something that we're really like announcing, but it is possible. The new certificate options, it's basically to validate the filer certificate to avoid man-in-the-middle attacks, the standard, certificate type of stuff. It obtains and stores the filer certificate on disk, or optionally can use one that the user provides, and it's validated by REST APIs. And this is an overview of the options. The default, it's a trust on first use type of approach, where the default is to accept the certificate from the filer and not to replace it. And there are options that allow replacing it. There is an option that allows using a local certificate on disk, and there is a skip option. And the point of the skip option is it's really for diagnostic purposes, as if there is a problem with a certificate, that it can be used to troubleshoot that and to temporarily bypass it. For obvious reasons, it's not really recommended to use it without advice from support. These are all the dependencies. The most important thing to mention here, I think, is with OpenSSL. The SDK that was used for this release of the client still depended on an older version of OpenSSL that was shipped with the SDK. Future versions of the SDK will no longer ship OpenSSL, and development will be building it. It'll be a new version of OpenSSL, but that's in the future. And, the overall logic of Snapdiff is not changed with version 3. It is not changed. Everything as far as that goes is pretty much the same.
Hey Pete, that was such a great session. Thank you so much. And I'm quite sure with these capabilities, we will be now able to support the Netapp filers better from data protection perspective. Thank you so much, viewers, for watching us.